Well, hi everybody. My name is Ravir Gurjal. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Shoot.
And I'm the Vice President of Marketing, Jody Farrar.
Yeah, we're actually going to be presenting today, so a small change to the program.
Surprise.
A little bit about Shoot by way of background. We actually work with a lot of leading travel brands around the world. Folks like Wyndham or the Ritz-Carlton or Hawaii or RCI. We also work with a number of destination marketing organizations. I actually mentioned Hawaii, but Costa Rica, Travel Alberta, the state of Montana, etc. And we work with them to capture all of the content and understand all the content that's actually being created by their audiences and visitors. And so we do a couple of things. One is we have a search engine that leverages image recognition technology, which I'll talk about in a little bit. That helps you really capture and find that perfect moment that a customer may be having. And then we actually have a full rights management and consent management suite that ultimately lets you take that content and publish it out everywhere a brand, or in this case, a travel brand, tells its story. We find that seamless experience from sort of discovery to publishing is allowing our brands to really tell more customized stories, very personalized stories. And that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So why am I qualified, or why are we qualified to be here talking to you about artificial intelligence? Well, some would argue that I'm not, but I'm here anyway. We have technology called Iris. Iris is our image recognition intelligence service. Iris leverages something called machine learning, in this case a deep learning neural network, that actually looks into images, splits them into a number of layers, in our case 128 to be specific, and finds all of the scenes and objects and logos that are hidden inside of those images, and it provides that insight back out to our customers. This is one of the sort of modern and recent manifestations of artificial intelligence. Actually, visual recognition, image recognition has gotten much more powerful in recent years. And of course, notably Google and folks like that have now put a lot of technology out into the world. So we'll talk a little bit more about Iris and its application a little later in the talk, but that's why we're here. So AI is a really, really big topic, right? And we have been fascinated by it for a really long time. When we think about AI, I do this as well. I kind of usually conjures images of like boy robots, right? Like Haley Joel Osment would just desperately want to be loved by a family, if you guys will recall. HAL for the older people in the crowd, right? Like myself. 2001: A Space Odyssey. More recently, you have Ava from Ex Machina, right? This is AI, right? And then of course Will Smith in a post-singularity dystopian universe fighting off sentient beings hell-bent on killing off humanity. A recurring theme in a lot of our Hollywood depictions, and of course Terminators, right? So it's no surprise that Hollywood and science fiction have really taken the narrative of AI as sort of the rise of robots, super intelligent robots, that are ultimately going to displace humans in one way or another. Actually, AI is a pretty loaded word. This belief is fairly widely held. 1/3 of people believe that AI poses a risk to humanity. I happen to be one of those people, but this talk is not about that. This talk is about the hope and the promise and the application of AI within more, let's say, reasonable measures. And so, what is it then, right? Let's take a step back. Let's actually define artificial intelligence for purposes of this conversation. Because, of course, we walk around thinking it's super intelligent robots that want to kill us all. Well, it's a couple of things. One is it's the theory and development of computer applications that perform functions that are normally require the intelligence of humans, right? It's pretty simple. Computers that do things that people usually we thought had to do. So these are things like sight, right? So visual perception. These are things like speech recognition, decision making, and of course translation, right? See, these are some of the applications that we have today that have gotten a lot better in very recent years, and we'll talk a little bit about why there's been an explosion. Why you could be at a conversation and talk about technology more broadly and want to have a discussion about AI more specifically. So if you will, bear with me for a moment. I'd love to go through a little bit of the history of artificial intelligence and how we got here, and of course why it's so interesting. So AI, in a modern sense, has really been around for over 70 years. A lot of the breakthroughs started back in World War II. So I think most of you probably are familiar with Alan Turing and the Turing machine, right? This was really the predecessor to the modern computer. Turing created his famous machine to defeat the Enigma encoding machines, or help defeat the Nazis in World War II. But what was really interesting about Alan Turing is a very, very smart guy. One of the first things he thought about as he was developing his machine was, wow, someday these machines are going to be smarter than us. And so he developed something called the Turing test, right alongside the time he was actually developing the machine itself, which was to help us distinguish whether or not a computer is as intelligent or indistinguishable from a person. So just for all you history buffs out there, the Turing test took a few forms. Does anybody remember what the first Turing test was actually called? Anybody? The Imitation Game. Hence the name of the movie. So that's a little inside trivia next time you're going through your Netflix queue, which we know will be highly recommended and tuned because you participated in this conversation today. So it wasn't very long until science fiction took up the narrative, right? I, Robot actually came out in 1950. Isaac Asimov wrote it as a collection of short stories. But, immediately after we had the invention of computers, there were a lot of doom and gloom scenarios painted. This isn't drastically different than today. And then we thought, fast forward 3 or 4 decades, and none of them really came true. Because it turns out this crap is really, really hard, right? It wasn't just about the emergence of computers following Moore's law with vastly increasing ability to process information. You actually had the robotics industry, which was more bound by physics and a little bit less able to keep up with the pace. And so a lot of these predictions of the early demise of humanity, weren't really going to come true. However, fast forward a few more years, almost 4 decades ago now, big business, corporate America, started engaging and adopting artificial intelligence. And from then, I think we've seen the curve get a little bit steeper. So anybody remember the first time a computer beat a reigning world chess champion at chess? This is 1997, and Deep Blue was actually developed by IBM. In that case, it was almost a purpose-built computer to beat somebody at chess. It's paved the way to actually, it was the basis of IBM's Watson program. So for those of you who are familiar now, IBM's Watson program is effectively their all-encompassing data science, big data, big cloud, buzzword, artificial intelligence program that they're trying to push further and further into corporate America and really be the engine behind decision-making and insights. And we'll talk about the difference between data and insights a little bit more because that's truly where the opportunity for artificial intelligence lies. So now fast forward a little bit further, right? A little over a decade ago, 2002, 60 years of research and development, investment in artificial intelligence. And we really got finally to the culmination of all of that hard work. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We put an autonomous vacuum in people's homes. This is it. This is how most of us today actually deal with robots inside of our home. This is, in many ways, replacing a very important function, but it finally worked, right? It took us 60 years to get from the Turing machine to the Roomba. However, I would say in the last decade, we've had a far greater explosion in development, and the peak of adoption, learning, progress has never been steeper. Right? In the last 5 years, we've done more with AI than we did in the previous 70 years. And the reason is largely because of machine learning. Right? There are new technologies that we're using. And if you want to simplify AI, right? Historically, when we talked a lot about artificial intelligence, I think people really mistook artificial intelligence with just basic computing. This idea that you have a really big database, and you can ask it queries, and it's going to spit out an answer. Well, if you put that behind some animatronic object at a carnival, it looked like artificial intelligence, right? That was really cool. Or some genie giving you answers. There must be something, there must be some AI in that. But now, the idea of artificial intelligence is simply, the concept that we need to grasp is simply that the machine can teach itself, right? So we don't need to tell it what every single, thing in the road is. It can identify and learn hazards over a series of patterns as it begins to identify those objects on its own. And so AI and machine learning are really a part of almost everything we see today as it comes to large consumer technology experiences, right? Whether it's a Yelp recommendation engine, it's starting to get in places like that. Certainly your Facebook feed Any ad you see, right? The ad tech industry in many ways is driving a lot of the machine learning that's customizing the internet for us. And all this stuff I think is of course really, really powerful. Now today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the physical manifestations and the more visual manifestations of artificial intelligence, right? Like this is a robot that Starwood is testing out in their Aloft properties. It'll deliver you a toothbrush, and it'll know how to navigate around the hotel, a lot like the Roomba would. But really, the vast majority of progress is taking place behind the scenes, right? This is what AI looks like today. The vast majority of progress that you are going to see in artificial intelligence over the course of the next 5 years, certainly, and the majority of the next decade, is going to be seamlessly tucked into the services and the software and the interfaces that we know and use and are familiar with today. But therein lies a great opportunity. So why is AI important, right? Well, the number one reason is actually that in the travel and hospitality space in particular, we need to invest in technologies, advanced technologies. We need to invest in research and development. The reason we need to do that is because the consumer experience is changing so rapidly, and the consumer expectation is changing so rapidly. So you guys know that Google, right, with Google I/O, recently made some announcements around home automation, right? And they've been investing in, certainly they acquired Nest, and they've been investing in the area for quite some time. Apple, et cetera, the same. You have lots and lots of companies putting billions of dollars in home automation to make sure those creature comforts that we enjoy at home are getting better and better and more seamless and, in fact, more enjoyable. And then we go on the road. And we enjoy none of the customization that we enjoy in our home. We enjoy none of the personalization. We go to a place that doesn't seem to know who we are. Right? We learned this earlier today. We heard about it from Gody, and we'll certainly talk about some of that. The difference between being at home and being on the road, while always something that road warriors, right, in business always talked about, that gap is only going to grow wider. And we are going to disappoint our audience if we don't take steps to bridge that gap. And actually, artificial intelligence is a great platform for us to help actually bridge that gap. And so I'm going to hand it over to Jody here in a second, but the thing I want to note is that the emerging traveler, the emerging generation of traveler, is so much more comfortable. They grew up with technology far more natively. They're the ones that in many ways are the early adopters of home technology. We in the travel industry, again, have to appeal to this rising emerging demographic of traveler. So we want to learn a little bit more about who that emerging demographic is and what they like and want.
All right, so we've been talking about millennials for a while, and much of what we know about them is they're young and they're broke, and we can kind of ignore them for a while. But the reality is that is no longer true. As of last year, they actually outpaced the baby boomers as the largest population of people. So this is your new traveler, and their age is 18 to 35. So they're actually very much joining the workforce and are contributing members of society and are starting to spend money in the travel space. According to a study that the UN did, 20% of all international travelers are millennials, and they actually spend more than previous generations did on their travels to date. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about boomers and Gen X are starting to take trips by themselves or with a couple versus with the whole family. They might also be staying with their children as they go to visit their grandchildren, not staying in hotels anymore, not dining out. They're more about the experience with their family, versus millennials value success in different ways. So especially for the boomers, they valued success very much on the ability to buy a home. And that's not something that the millennials care as much about yet. They are putting off having children and starting families. They're putting off buying that home because they're all about experiencing the world. And so they're investing more dollars in those experiences to visit new places and to learn about the world. They're also very different than previous generations, which as a marketer makes my job a little bit more challenging. But this is really, they're not used to just getting one-way communication from a brand. It's not something they're accustomed to at all. As Ravir mentioned, these are digital natives, which really means they've grown up with things like internet, Wi-Fi, and mobile devices at their fingertips their entire lives. So they very much expect to be part of that feedback loop with a brand. So a boomer might think I send a question off to a brand and it's perfectly okay that they didn't get back to me. They sent me to a generic FAQ. They're really busy. They've got a lot of other customers. A millennial is not okay with that. They expect to get a very personalized answer back, and they expect to get that almost instantaneously. And if they don't, where do they go? To social media, and they let the whole world know how this brand didn't respond to them. We actually did a study back in December, and we asked millennials, what would make you cancel a trip that you already had planned? And just behind some catastrophic event or a natural disaster was a bad review on social media. And I think this was covered earlier as well, is about that importance of reviews and how much impact they have on where someone actually ends up traveling. Oh, actually, I want to back up on that. I think that that's a good part of where I think AI can actually start to help, and you're starting to see this already with chatbots. So already you're seeing that customer service can't keep up with all of the questions that they get and the timeliness that they're expected to respond. And so chatbots are popping up more that actually either give the customer service representative an idea based on the questions and the type of words they're seeing in the query to make a recommendation on here's 6 things that they might be talking about so they can respond faster. And in some cases, brands are actually allowing the bots to respond automatically before escalating to an actual human. I think you'll see this happen more even with community managers on the social side as well, simply because they can't keep up with all the comments and responses that are coming in. And so if they can start to train a machine that starts to understand and show some empathy to the questions and the comments that are coming in, they can start to turn that more over to machines. This audience also has a different form of inspiration that is different than previous generations. So in the case of millennials, they are finding their source of inspiration for where they're going to go on their trip primarily from social media, and then followed by in-person recommendations. Centennials, I'll explain what that is in a second. Centennials actually are looking at in-person recommendations as their number one source of inspiration, followed by social. This makes a lot of sense in many ways in that for Centennials, which are ages 13 to 17, they're the generation up and coming, somebody new to start worrying about, they're still in homeroom. So they're getting the recommendations from their friends in their classroom, and that's where they're finding their source of inspiration and then coming home and telling mom and dad about it. Millennials, on the other hand, are starting to graduate from both high school and from college and entering the workforce. So they're staying connected with those friends and family they've made via social media. This is also, and Ravir's going to talk about this in a little bit, but this idea of in-person recommendations and social, which are still largely coming from their friends, really opens up a lot of opportunity for AI in the area of personalization. So the more that a brand can start to offer personalized recommendations, the more likely you're going to start falling into that category that really resonates with a traveler before they make a decision on where to go. What's also interesting as a marketer, I'm not sure how many marketers are in the room, is that more traditional sources of marketing are not as effective. So where we're putting a ton of time into our website or into our print ads or ads in general, just does not have the same resonance that it does as an in-person recommendation or social media for this audience. And so you may be asking, why are we talking about Centennials? Who are these people? They're 13 to 17, certainly do not have any dollars that are impacting the travel business yet. But what's interesting, while they don't actually have the purse strings, they are certainly tugging on them. So 83% are saying that they're being asked by family members and friends on where to go before they travel. So certainly an audience that has grown up, surrounded by technology that is making a lot of impact on where people go and where their travel might take them. And what's interesting here is, I don't know how many of you guys have teens, but would you ever take a trip without asking them where you might go? Anybody? No. I have a 6-year-old who has decided our entire family vacation because there's no way I would get on a plane with her without her bought into the whole business of it. We're going to Legoland, in case anyone is curious. So that's where we're going to go. And so why am I telling you this? And I think part of it is, what Ravir is speaking to is that as these younger generations come up, they are just consumed with technology. They're very comfortable with it. They're not afraid of it. They're excited to try it. Ravir makes fun of my computer screen because it has fingerprints all over it, and it's because my 3-year-old assumes it's a touchscreen. Why wouldn't it be a touchscreen? And so I think that's the generation that we're starting to deal with, and travel needs to keep up with it. What's interesting, and this kind of just layers on top of this, is it's not so much about, there's certainly a few hotel groups, and we're going to talk about some of those, and OTAs are doing some really creative and fascinating things around AI. But it's also just the everyday AI that started to infiltrate our lives already. And some of those things, might be When you wake up in the morning, your phone is probably the last thing that you looked at before you went to bed. You guys can admit it. It's okay. And then when you get up in the morning, it's the very first thing that you look at. And the first thing I do is ask Siri, what do I have to look forward to today? And she tells me how many meetings I have. She tells me how many minutes I have to get to those meetings. I rely on her. If I'm listening to music, my Amazon Echo can tell me what song I'm listening to. It can tell me who the artist is, and it can start to download that MP3. We rely on our thermostats to get smart and to understand our behaviors of when we're coming in and out of the house, to understand any other environments around them to make our personal comfort very easy. I'm not going to read this whole quote to you, but this was a quote in Information Age, and really the gist of it is that if the technology and user experience does not match up to expectations, which continue to grow in the digital age, customers will very quickly look elsewhere. And I know there's a lot of startups in the room, and for you, that should hopefully light up some light bulbs for you, because this is your opportunity. This is a time of disruption. And so as legacy brands do not keep up, or hopefully they will, but if they do not, this is an opportunity for new technologies to come in and to make this experience more seamless for the traveler. And then I also just want to make the point of this as well, because sometimes I think we do forget that some very basic needs for today's traveler is give them a way to access their mobile device, and my God, make the Wi-Fi free.
Thank you. So speaking about the generational sort of influence a little bit, what's important, I think, about this emerging traveler is, as we've briefly mentioned, is they're used to so many of these technologies infiltrating their day-to-day customer experience, day-to-day consumer experience, right? And so that is the number one opportunity, as Jody was mentioning, with AI inside of travel and hospitality. It's to use the fact that we were using a bunch of cloud-based services, try to break down some of those silos, build bridges, so we can actually have seamless experiences from beginning to end. And we're going to talk about a few of those things. But at the very least, our phone could be the key that begins to unlock personalization through every door we walk, or through on every seat we sit down on, into every flight or place or journey that we book. And I think that is something that's really, really powerful, and machine learning can play a huge role in that. We heard about this today, right? Personalization. This notion that we go through every single time and we don't understand, we go through a booking process every single time and we have to remember our own preferences, and the machine isn't helping us yet, I think is archaic. And that is going to go away in the coming years. The second thing is the complement the human workforce, right? I think the notion of AI that I kind of started the talk with was that we were going to replace, right? That ultimately robots are going to replace all of us. I'll tell you, building a droid army is hard. I tried. Of course, I was using Legos, and so there were no mechanics or brain. But I'll tell you, when I was 5, they didn't take over anything or do any of my chores or cleaning. And then, of course, the great opportunity is to synthesize data to extract insights, right? Again, machine learning. And the idea here is that you don't have to pre-program all the insights. This is the concept that's really hard to grasp sometimes, right? Because we're used to a computer or a spreadsheet or a function doing something for us. For example, revenue, pricing in airlines and hotels is still largely managed today on spreadsheets by people. That's not going to be the case in the coming years because it's extraordinarily uncompetitive to do so. It's extraordinarily expensive, and ultimately, you're going to lose to the machines.
Yeah, so a little bit about creating seamless experiences, which a lot of it right now is about how do we take all these different devices and technologies and apps that we're using and make them talk to each other. And at some point on the machine learning side, it's not only that those technologies will start to talk to each other, they'll actually start to make some decisions for you and make recommendations for you. And I think we're just in the beginning of this and what it means for travel. But what you're starting to see is the hospitality industry start to embrace at least smart technology. So there are hotels now that can at least tell when someone has entered the room, either whether that's via the key card or actual motion sensors or sound sensors where they're able to detect someone is in there and change the thermostat accordingly, or even the lights. And so this has impact for the hotel business. Certainly they can save money if they're not heating and cooling a room that is vacant. And it also might make the traveler feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy. But in the future, what could happen is if that their phone actually had a fitness app on it and they knew they'd been out running, perhaps 3 minutes before they're on property, which the device would know, thermostat pops up and it cranks up the air conditioner for them, so when they come in, it's nice and cool. So the idea that just right now they're using smart technology will continue to get better and will continue to be personal to that person and to the traveler's experience. We're also seeing more mobile apps, and almost every hotel and airline has some kind of mobile app. And I can argue about some of the value of them. I do think some of them just tend to be a mobile-friendly website version, which I think they have a lot of room to grow there. But Aloft Hotels is doing something interesting where now there's this expectation that I can have an app on my phone that unlocks my car and starts my car engine. So why in the world can I have an app on my phone that gives me that is able to unlock my hotel room? And that's what Aloft has done as well. So it works with any of your Apple devices, including the Apple Watch. So what's next? So I think, like I said, I think we're just in the beginning of where this can go. But the idea is that I have this device, my personal device, that knows every single thing about me and all of my preferences. It has all of my favorite music and TV shows on it. So if I get into an airplane, instead of being told by the airline, here's the 20 shows that you can watch, once we get up in the air, instead of being able to get on the plane and it immediately says, hey, here's access to all of your Netflix, and you're able just to go ahead and start watching that as soon as you get on the plane. It's about me and my travel experience. Walking into a hotel room, we flip on the television, it tells us some random happenings that are going on at the hotel property, most of which I don't care about. But what if it was connected to my calendar and could tell me, hey, you have this block of time open and here's some relevant things that are happening at the property that you would enjoy and you would like to do. Those are the things that can happen in the future.
So as we've heard a couple of times today, personalization is important. It's the future of travel. To me, this is, if I may repeat myself, this is where AI will make the most profound impact in the near to medium term. It is to bring the intelligence of computing power to personalizing our experiences. Today, planning a trip is really, really, really hard, actually. There are so many choices and so many options and so many places to go, and you have to make so many minute and discrete decisions in the process of planning a trip. So this friction actually turns an incredible number of people off, right? How many of you want to book that flight to that place that you want to go and you just keep putting it off because you haven't decided, what airline or what route or what fare or who are you going to go with, and you're trying to wrangle your friends? All of this stuff happens every single day, and it's actually really, really difficult. The internet has empowered us, right? We have all of the information that, for example, the knowledgeable travel agent of the past used to have. I grew up with my parents. They had AAA membership, and we used to go to AAA and get triptychs, right, which were the map and the little places we were going to go, and we had to go and do that. I mean, no one does that anymore, right? We have that information on the internet, right? We have services that will give a lot of that, and we've actually heard from some startups that will do similar things as well. The OTAs and Google, they have done an incredible job of basically making the entire world's travel inventory searchable, right? That's really, really powerful. But what that's been historically is a really, really large database and a number of queries that you can support to extract information from that database. Right? That's not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will be when the machine begins to learn and begins to proactively push to you things that you are going to want before you have to make that query. Help you make decisions alongside your human brain, which can be very taxed. So I'll give you an example. My personal travel algorithm, I believe, is something that is so complex that I cannot entrust any other human with this algorithm. What do I mean by my personal travel algorithm? Well, when I'm booking a flight, I have to decide, well, I have status on 2 airlines, but in my mind, I have some trips later in the year that are going to be international, so that's going to get me to gold on Delta, so I'm okay with the United trip this time around, right? Am I willing to pay $25 more to get a window seat, or is it a middle? Is it the exit rows on this flight? Do I want to get home an hour later so I can get that availability? What about car rental? Well, the cheapest one is Ace, and that's like a private shuttle I have to take somewhere. That's not in the rental car center, but it's double the cost. Am I willing to go Avis? Right? All of this stuff comes into our minds, right? For those of you who have kids, right, like we do, am I willing to pay more to take the earlier flight to get home? Well, it actually depends. Did I travel last week, so now do I have a bunch of guilt and I need to get home and I'm not going to take that flight that's even an hour later, even though it's $78 cheaper? That is my personal travel algorithm. That is why I don't entrust any other human, because when I'm making those decisions around travel, and we all do it, we have so many pieces of information and bits and bytes that are floating around in our head. Well, guess what? the time has come, and we heard about this a little bit earlier today, where the machine can begin to look at every single travel decision you've ever made. And they'll know the flights that you passed on because you looked at them and you didn't book, or you waited, or you got panicky and started hitting refresh or going back every day, or you set up a Kayak flight alert. All of this data, imagine if it's in one place. I trust that the machine is going to learn my personal travel algorithm before any other human would. That's artificial intelligence. So, quickly going through, Alexis is one of the a startup that's providing some intelligence that you look at your personal preferences and actually can recommend activities that you can do. This is apart from just the regular flights. These are things that augment your actual trip. It's pretty powerful. The founders of Kayak actually just announced and launched something called Lola. It's actually still private. If anybody's got a code to get in, I'd love to try it out. But this actually uses AI in conjunction with humans, understanding the relative limitations of both, right? So this cyborg app is actually going to be pretty cool because it allows us to augment the actual human behavior and the human limitations to get faster and better answers. So we think that's a pretty cool opportunity. And there's a number of others in this space. But what's going to happen next, right? A lot of the existing examples are around trip planning. But what about during my trip? What about after my trip? I think that ultimately, as Jody mentioned, this notion of understanding all of my data, my calendar, my preferences, we're going to be able to push recommendations to you that are going to be incredible, and they're going to be relevant, and you're actually going to do them. And that's the real key, breaking down that friction. So really quickly, Sabre and Forrester did a survey. Over half of people surveyed are willing to, travelers surveyed are willing to give some information in exchange for getting something that matters to them. Right? This whole notion of, I'll share a little bit, and I want something in return, pretty much is more and more widely held today. Right? We say we care a lot about privacy when we are asked about it, but we do not behave as if we care about privacy. Right? What was the last EULA any of you read? No, we didn't. And so this is really leveraging. Other industries are really leveraging this technology. The whole notion of putting the perfect piece of content in front of the perfect person at the right place and time is the holy grail of marketing. And only with machine learning are we going to be able to get there.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about complementing human behavior, which we're going to pay attention to some of our robot friends in this section because it seems fitting. So there are certainly a few hotels that have started to adopt robots. And so we already mentioned Bottler, which is at the Aloft Hotels here in the peninsula. And he roams around the hotel greeting guests and then delivering things that they might have forgotten to their room. In Yotel in New York, they actually have a robot that takes your bags. So if you're headed out for the day and you need to drop your bags off, you don't leave them with a bellman, you leave them with this robot here and he stores it for you. There's also a hotel in Japan, I think about 18 months ago, that opened that has all of their front desk staff are robots. They actually look very human. They speak multiple languages. Their facial expressions are supposed to change based on how they're interacting with the guest. And at one point, they did do a promotion where a Velociraptor was one of the attendants there that could check you in, which went over well on social media. But the idea behind these robots so far have been largely gimmicky, I would argue. They're not really adding a lot of efficiency to the hotel. They're not really meant to work seamlessly with the guests. Much of it has been around a test and an experiment, and certainly a fun opportunity for guests to take some selfies in front of a robot that's greeting them. But I think the idea that AI can start to take over human tasks is very real. It just may not always need to be in the form of a robot yet. And so I think some of it that we're starting to see is that you've seen this already with the airline industry. We used to have tons of people that would check you in when you dropped off and you needed your boarding pass. And now those are replaced by kiosks. So you're able to put in a credit card or your confirmation number and very quickly take yourself and head on into your flight. The same might happen for hotels versus actually having robots check you in. There are a certain number of people, and I would agree with them, that believe losing that human interaction would be pretty devastating for a brand. Like, this is your opportunity. I compete with multiple hotels. How do I really build a relationship if I put a robot in front of my guest and that's their first experience? Like, that's my job to do that. So there are certainly ways that AI can start to be part of this process that can still leave that human interaction. So maybe AI is more about, we already know this guest has a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. And so when they come in, your hotel greeter is able to check them in as normal and say, we've already have your subscription for the Wall Street Journal. It'll be delivered at 9 a.m. for you. We already know because of open table listings that these are the restaurants you like, and we've sent you an email with everything that you might want to do while you're here. So there are other ways that AI can start to make the hotel attendant a little bit more personalized for that guest, but still be very human at the same time.
So I think we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to try to fly through this. But this is the other big area where AI is going to have significant impact, which is the synthesization of data to extract insights. So in our product in particular, this is something we call Shoot Discover, which is the idea of being able to discover all of the particular content that you want that your guests are creating when they visit your destinations. And there's really two primary purposes. One is to actually just discover trends, underlying people, influencers, topics that people are talking about, content as it relates to informing some sort of behavior or some sort of pattern that you want to increase the viability and effectiveness of your marketing. The second thing is to actually find specific pieces of content that you can actually then use in your marketing. And so I'll give you an example of that, right? So if I'm looking at a bunch of, let's say, generic travel topics here, and I could set up a stream from Instagram or Twitter, pulling in content from those social networks, I could say, okay, I want to know all of the pictures that have come in, and there's probably 10 or 12 million photos a day coming through this stream. I want to see all the ones with people, and you can kind of faintly see that. So now I've used our artificial intelligence, right, our machine learning network, to filter all of the images and identify people in them. Well, I could say, now I want to see people on the beach because this is something that I'm looking for a particular type of ad copy, or I want to see a group of folks, something that I might want to tweet out. But, I'm local. So I can combine not just a hashtag search and an image recognition search, but I could say, I want to see these photos in Rio de Janeiro. And now I have now I've combined all of those search parameters and I've created this output. And now from what Shoot allows you to do is then select any of these images and actually reach out to those original publishers and get consent to use that content in your marketing. And so this is something that we do, of course, with lots of hotel brands across the hospitality space, and then, of course, with destination marketers as well, as I mentioned before. Yeah, and we have negative a minute.
Okay, so we'll go fast. So there are some technologies that exist today outside of AI that might be a little bit easier for you to start to absorb into your property. I mentioned mobile apps. This is certainly, I think, room for growth here, but you're starting to see mobile apps that are more than just check-in. It's more about how can we be a concierge from your phone? Who wants to pick up the phone and call the front desk? Now I can request more towels or whatever it might need from my mobile device. You'll start to see more and more of that. Your CRM system. This is a way for you to not only track every email they're getting, but every phone call, every social interaction, and start to send messages that actually work. As a marketer, the ability for spam and ad blockers is a real problem. But if I'm sending something that's actually very relevant and matters to them, they're more likely to engage with that content. Social listening, this is again something Ravir just talked about, is social is a great place to engage with all of your travelers, but it's also a lot of data packed into every single photo that's shared on social media. And so this is another place we're starting to see more brands tap into to discover insights, to discover influencers, start to interact and reach out with those people in that way also. VR, I think you guys have already talked a little about this, but this is just another way for guests to start to understand what they'll be able to do at your property or at a destination that makes it a little bit more real for them before booking. Drones, I do not believe drones are going to start delivering cocktails poolside. That'd be pretty cool, but I think we're a few years away from that. But what they do allow us to do is to, again, give a different vantage point to travelers, beautiful bird's eye views of a property, a destination, in all different seasons, times of day, that really let them understand what they're going to see when they get there.
So I'm going to fast forward actually a little bit to talk about the future, if we could, since we're running out of time. So these are our predictions for what the future of travel will be like a mere 5 years from now. Some things will be very, very different, and some things will be agonizingly the same. Thank you very much. That's my. So what's going to be different? What's going to be the same? What are we going to experience in 2021? Well, travel, believe it or not, doesn't start when you travel. It doesn't start when you book. It starts when you are incepted with the idea of where you want to go. How many of you have a bucket list somewhere in your mind, all the places you want to go, right? That's human nature, right? Our wanderlust. That's what we all have. The key for marketers is to be the ones incepting that idea. This is where artificial intelligence actually has a real advantage, because the dream is to put that perfect piece of content in front of you at the right place at the right time. And the reason we know it's a perfect piece of content is not just because of things you've physically opted into or things that you've signed up for. It's because of every website you go to, everywhere you walk with your phone that's tracking you, every single behavior, every single activity, all of these things that you do, it's out there, folks. And our notion of privacy, which is an entirely separate conversation, I think, are being compromised in many ways, but in ways that are advantageous to the marketer. The consumer value exchange, however, is that if we give you good content, then you actually get a benefit from it. And thus far, consumers are largely in favor of that. If you're the CMO of Unilever, you think that you're going to see more of this tailored, targeted, artificial intelligence-driven content. And I think it's starting to happen today. This is a billboard by Sachi in London that actually reacts to the people in front of it. It knows whether you're happy or sad, and it remixes the content based on the feedback that they're getting, so that the 100th person to see this ad, it's going to be more effective than the first person to see this ad. It's like A/B testing in real life. It's really, really powerful. So now this idea has been incepted, right? Google and Facebook and others, they know you want to go to Croatia. Well, then what? Right? Then what happens? There is so much hope lost from our bucket list to the actual act of booking, right? Because if we went on our bucket list, none of us would be here. Like, we have lots of places to go. There's so much friction in this process, which I talked about a little bit earlier. This is where I think actually platforms like Facebook and Google are going to have a significant amount of advantage, because we know you wanted to go to Croatia because you liked your friends' Croatia photos and you commented on them and said, I wish I could go here. Right? But who knows that? Actually, right now, that's very siloed within the social networks. And as they push out their travel products, and I think you'll see things like that, commerce and things like that coming from Facebook, or at least Facebook being able to share that information with OTAs and other travel marketers. As we unlock that information, you're going to see far more of these personalized results. And so the planning phase, of course, no one, again, another prediction is in 5 years, 50% of travelers will not book a hotel unless they can take a full virtual reality tour of that property. Would you book a hotel today without a picture of it, a sight unseen? Unless it's highly recommended, there's no chance you would. Well, this is the picture of tomorrow. You're not going anywhere without that virtual reality. Now, what happens now when I'm finally on the trip? Well, when I land, or when I'm ready to take off, my autonomous self-driving vehicle that we heard about earlier today, it's going to show up. And I didn't have to call it, because it knows my flight time, it knows TSA wait times, it knows traffic patterns, and it's going to show up because it's been seamlessly integrated into my entire booking experience. Now, I don't think we're going to do like full body heat scans when you get to the airport. TSA will do that for me, people with this kind of beard, but not to your average traveler, right? And but what we will have is we'll have highly personalized experience delivered by the airlines themselves. So right now, you can go to terminals and they're getting upgraded because they have power and they have iPads and they have comfortable seats. Pretty soon, you're going to be able to check in with your phone and you're going to get all of your content, all of your entertainment, a bunch of options that can augment the trip, because they are the ones who know how long you're going to be in a given destination. That's really powerful. Planes fly themselves today. The software upgrades are going to get even better. We don't need to hit on that even more. In around 5 years' time, you're going to see the first fully personalized VOD units come to market. So welcome, Ravir. Thank you for being a gold flyer on Delta Airlines. Would you like to continue watching season 6, episode 4 of Narcos on Netflix? All of that is going to be seamless. All of that is going to be fully integrated. When I land, I'm not going to get this car. This is a little more than 5 years away, but it's going to be there waiting for me, and I didn't have to pull out my Uber app. I didn't have to call it. It'll be there because it knows when my flight landed. It knows how long it takes for me to walk from the gate to the terminal. And all that information is available, making for a seamless experience. I get to the hotel, and of course, I have a key. I have some of this today. I'm going to have a lot more of it in the future. There's no front desk, though. And if I'm a hospitality brand, I want to make sure that I'm delivering a personalized experience. Part of a personalized experience is human touch. That's not changing in the next 5 years. So now the front desk is gone. I freed staff to come out and greet guests personally. And guess what? Because of my phone, because of beacons, because I walk in the door, they know my face, they know my image, they know my name, and they greet me and they say, welcome, Mr. Gurjal. Thanks for staying at the Shangri-La. We're so happy to have you again. If there's anything I can do in my stay, anything I can do during your stay, please ask. This technology is available. And here, when I get to my room, I have smart mirrors, right? Starwood is experimenting with this technology. We'll begin to see it rolled out pretty soon. Today, it's just about tweets and weather and things like that. But in the future, they're going to know, because of my calendar that I have a 3-hour window tomorrow, they're going to know all of my personal preferences for the things that I like to do. And I'm just going to be able to tap these things, and I'm going to be able to swipe them and push them to my phone. And all the tickets are going to be taken care of. All the bookings are going to be taken care of. All the reservations are going to be taken care of. In 5 years, hospitality brands will be talking about ancillary and referral revenue as a new revenue stream, because they are home base when you are traveling somewhere else. And by the way, this can take place in iPads for Airbnb owners as well. This is going to be something that has meaningful revenue behind it starting in 5 years. After the trip, we'll know what you did, what you opted into. All of that will go into that personalized database that we talked about earlier. So next time it's even better. The idea of the machine is that it learns. We don't have to program it to learn all the things that I did, all of those activities, all the things I opted into. It's going to know, and my travel experience is going to get better and better. There's never been a better time to be marketing travel, ladies and gentlemen. This entire generation of emerging travelers values experiences so much more than they value material possessions. This stuff is pretty exciting. Thank you.
Let's have a round of applause from Ravir and Jody from Shoot.